Please stand for the reading of the Gospel. The Gospel reading is Matthew chapter 17, beginning with the first verse. And after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John his brother, and led them up a high mountain apart. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his garments became white as light. And behold, there appeared to them Moses and Elijah, talking with him. And Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is well that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 booths here, one for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He was still speaking when, lo, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell on their faces and were filled with awe. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Rise and have no fear." And when they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. And as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus commanded them, "Tell no one the vision until the Son of Man is raised from the dead." This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
It occurs to me, hearing that for the 4th time this morning, that that passage contains what must be the great understatement of the Bible. Jesus is shining. Moses and Elijah appear out of the midst of history. And Peter says, "Lord, it is good that we are here." Like, yeah, it's like amazing. It's on a mountain. What is it with mountains? Mountains in the Bible, Jesus' first sermon is on the mount. Moses goes up on Mount Sinai. He communes with God. He brings the commandments down. He's got a glow on his face when he comes down. He leads the Israelites through the wilderness for 40 years. Finally, they come to Mount Pisgah, which overlooks the bounty of the promised land. And Moses doesn't get to go in, right? He dies, like at that moment, advanced age. But before he does, he preaches a sermon to the people and tells them that God has set you free. Here's what you need to stay free. Here's what you need to do to stay free. The snows on Mount Hermon melt and flow down and form the Jordan River, which gives water to the entire land of Israel. Elijah goes up on Mount Carmel, has a contest with the Canaanite priests. He goes to Mount Horeb, and there's a storm, there's an earthquake, there's fire, but God's not in that. God's in the still, small voice. Solomon built his temple on Mount Zion. Jesus is crucified on a mount called Calvary. Mountains. Think about amazing mountains that you've been to or you've seen pictures of. We're doing our series on beauty, and I've been reading a lot of people who philosophize about beauty, and they use this term called the sublime. Now here's how they define the sublime. You have beauty that, for instance, if you see a grassy meadow, you think, "Oh, that's pretty," and it looks inviting, and you want to walk through that meadow. It's beautiful. What these philosophers, though, say is the beauty of a mountain is different, and they call it the sublime, because with a mountain, it's not like a grassy meadow, is it? Like a mountain, there's something a little, it's ominous, it's almost threatening in a way. It's so big, it's so majestic, it's stunning. You can't just run up to the top and go see the thing. The air is thinner, frightens you a little. Our family, we enjoy hiking mountains for fun. I remember I was with my son in Scotland. We were about to hike Ben Nevis, and we came to this particularly arduous trail, and the sign at the entrance said, "Danger of death." No, it was like, this is the place. And it was a really hard hike. That's what made it cool, right? It wasn't like a little walk through a meadow. It was a hard hike up this mountain where there was danger of death, right? Mountains, sublime. The Bible suggests that God is like that, right? God's not like just this grassy meadow, kind of easy to walk around in, right? But God's more like a mountain. You can't just amble up there. The air is thinner. You can see further when you get near God, but it's a little bit threatening. There's some danger, maybe to your old self I don't know. You tremble a little. Not surprisingly, Martin Luther King, on the last night of his life, he didn't know it was the last night of his life. It was haunting what he actually said on the last night of his life, preaching in Memphis. He ended his sermon by saying, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. And I don't mind, like anybody, I want to live a long life, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He's been to the mountaintop. Jesus, in this story, goes to a mountaintop. He takes Peter, James, and John with him, but he's not alone. Moses and Elijah appear. Jesus shines this day. I don't know what that is. He's transfigured. He glows. He shines. What this is, I think, is that Jesus always was beautiful, and this is a day he was like really beautiful, right? We tend to forget about the beauty of Jesus. We think, what did Jesus do? What does Jesus want me to do? What's Jesus going to be mad if I don't do it or whatever? But just the beauty of Jesus, if you think about it. God was in heaven, but it didn't suit God to remain remote and invisible and omnipotent and all those omnis up in heaven. But instead, God said, I want to come down. I want them to know me. I want to know them. I want to feel what they feel. I want to evoke tenderness and love from them. So God became flesh and blood like all of us, but became an infant. I mean, what does an infant ask for? Just love, tenderness. Infant doesn't scare anybody. The beauty of Jesus. This is so interesting. Jesus fulfilled what I mentioned in last week's sermon. This guy Arthur Brooks spoke at that now infamous National Prayer Breakfast. And he challenged the group there to become missionaries for love in the face of contempt. Jesus did that all the time. He was a missionary for love in the face of contempt. Jesus, you think about the beauty of Jesus. Jesus touched untouchable people. Right? So those that we might size up as ugly, Jesus touched them. And that's part of his beauty, right? Is that he touched everybody. He welcomed everybody. He didn't avert his gaze from anybody. Jesus blessed the meek. Jesus blessed the mournful. If you want to know the beauty of Jesus, when he's on the cross, he looks down at the soldiers who have just driven nails into his hands and pierced a lance into his side, and they're down there making fun of him, ridiculing him, and he forgives them. They didn't ask for forgiveness. He just forgives them. I mean, the beauty of Jesus. And that forgiveness is so beautiful. If he can forgive them, what that means, he can forgive me. He can forgive you, all of us. Beauty of Jesus. Jesus was shining this day. Moses did some shining when he went up on the mountain. Moses was on that mountain for 40 days and 40 nights, just as Jesus had gone to the wilderness. And we kind of think desert, but the wilderness that Jesus went to for 40 days and 40 nights to be tempted, it's a mountainous area, right? So they spent 40 days and 40 nights in these dangerous, danger of death zones. And the 40 days is interesting. Lent begins this week. It's Wednesday, Ash Wednesday, and you'll come. You will come. You will come. And when you come on Ash Wednesday, it's just one of my favorite services of the year. You stand in a line and you come to the front and we take ashes when we make the sign of a cross on your head. It's just a wonderful service. And you go out grocery shopping out of that, people look at you funny. It's great. I love it. And Ash Wednesday, though, it's not like check, done. Ash Wednesday is the beginning. It's the first day of a 40-day journey that is called Lent. We're going somewhere. And let me suggest to you that for those 40 days, what we'll be doing together is we'll be climbing the mountain toward God. We'll be climbing the mountain that is God. It's hard, right? It's not a walk through a grassy meadow. It's like walking up a mountain, this thing of Lent. It requires some effort. It requires some Discipline. I've noticed this thing when Lisa and I, we love to hike in the mountains, and this will amaze you, what I'm about to tell you, is when you go up in the mountains and you're hiking, every now and then, I don't know why, habit, I pull my phone out and my phone doesn't work. And here's the amazing thing, is when this happens, I survive. It's amazing. That phone cannot work for 4, 5, 6 hours, and I'm okay. And I wonder if during Lent, if that might not be something, as you just turn your gadgets off for 10 minutes or 10 hours or maybe 10 days. If you did it for 10 days, that seems impossible, right? But you'd survive. You might actually grow closer to God. You see, what happens is we're always available, so then you're always available, and then you're never available to God. But if we shut that stuff off, we might be available to God. We might do something hard for God. We fast. We do without something. It's hard. That's what makes it beautiful. That day that Noah and I did that hike with the danger of death, it's one of the hardest days of my life. And when it was done, we just hugged each other like, wow. See, it was cool because it wasn't easy. It was cool because it was hard. You know this from your life. Anything you've done that's really meaningful, it wasn't easy for you. It was meaningful because it's hard. And what we do with this hard climb up this mountain is, let me suggest, what we're trying to do is we're trying to discover our true selves. We're trying to do a little bit of shining ourselves. This guy, Chaz Fagan, that's coming tonight, he's amazing. I've spent a lot of time with him the last few weeks, and he's got all these stories about, like, he painted the 2 bushes, the presidents. He's got backstory, talking to them about it. Amazing stuff. One of the things I want to ask him about is when you paint somebody's portrait, what are you trying to capture? Right? Because if somebody paints your portrait, they're not trying to catch you. Here's the worst day of his life. Here's the day she had a bad head cold. Here's the day after his mother died. No, when you paint a portrait, you're trying to capture that person's noblest self, that person's most beautiful self, your truest self. I think Lent is about discovering your truest self. The way this works, this is amazing. My favorite book about marriage is by this guy named Walter Wangerin. It's called As for Me and My House. He talks in there about how, he tells about when he was courting the woman who is now his wife. And he said what he did, he put his best foot forward. When I read all this, I'm going to read a quote in a minute. When I read all this really resonated with me because when Lisa and I were dating, she was here at 9:45 and people were checking, is this true? When Lisa and I were dating, I was amazing. I really was. I was neat. Hadn't happened since, but I was neat. I vacuumed with a smile on my face. I was amazing. And what Wangerin asks is when you do this, are you lying to the other person? And here's the way he describes it. He says, it's not lying. He said, I put my best foot forward. Was I deceiving her? Of course not. Listen to this. I was showing her what I truly believed myself to be in the generous light of her love and what I knew I could become, if only for the prize of her hand in marriage. I love that. There's some you that you dream of becoming, and it is you, but you've not realized it yet. You've not realized it yet, but if only for God, if only for God's love, if only for God's hand, you could be this person that you could become, this true, beautiful, noble self. Let me close with this so we get ready to come for communion. There's this, I love this. I was thinking about it this week. I hate lines. If Lisa and I show up at a restaurant and there's a line, I ain't staying, going. I just hate standing in line. It's just like, I hate it. I remember in 7th grade, I was such a good student that my teacher appointed me the lunch line monitor. I hated this job because I had to bounce kids who broke in line. I didn't even like lines. I was one who wanted to break in line. So I don't care for lines, but then it occurs to me that as a grown-up person, what I do is I make you guys stand in a line. And you're very independent people, but you do as I tell you. I say, come stand in a line, and you stand in the line. And it's a beautiful line. It's a wonderful line. There's this monk named Jeremy Driscoll, and he talks about how he and the other monks in the monastery, they're in line all the time. He says, we're always having processions. We don't just go helter-skelter. Anywhere we go in line. We go in procession. We process to a meal. We process to ourselves at night. We process to the cemetery to sing song. We process to the worship service together. We process everywhere. We don't just go helter-skelter. He said, I am glad for all this marching about. I experience it as a kind of extra in my life, reminding me again and again that I am not just vaguely moving through life. I am instead inserted into the definitive procession of the body of Christ. I'm part of a huge story, a huge movement, a definitive exodus. I am going somewhere. So I'm going to ask you to stand in line today because I want you to know you're going somewhere. You may feel like you're just vaguely moving through life. I said this at 8:30, and everybody was nodding like, I feel like I'm vaguely moving through life. Then you look up one day and you're old and you're like, what happened? We're just vaguely moving through life. Here we say we're going somewhere. We're going somewhere together. We're going to God together. We're going up that mountain together. We're going somewhere. It takes some discipline. You got to turn the gadgets off. But it's about discovering my true self, your beautiful self. When you get near God, you can see further. You make sense of everything. And you know the love. We're going somewhere together, and for this I give thanks to God.